Welcome to the Failing Upward Club. This is a space where we reflect on the lessons from failure, we think about things that have gone wrong in the past, and we try to take the lessons from them to carry forward to our next adventure. I'm Danny Tyrrell. I've got Mike Bridgman here as well. We're two of the previous co-founders of a company called DataCo Technologies in Australia, which recently had a almighty collapse for all sorts of different reasons, and it led us to reflect on so many different facets of business, thinking about what went right, what went wrong, and what we can think about in our business ventures going forward. Mike, welcome back. I know this topic today is going to be a super exciting one for you, but how you going, mate? We're a few weeks in. We're a month into 2026 now. How fast does a month go?
A month does go fast, yeah. I feel like, yeah, we've kind of said this before, but corporate Australia, you kind of lose all of December, lose all of January, and then you've sort of got, 10 months left of the year to try and get some work done. But yeah, it's flown by. Kids are back at school. Time to put the head down and get cracking.
Well, that's it. It's back to school week even for the adults this week. I think Tuesday was the busiest day in the Sydney CBD, probably the busiest day for the entire year as people go back to work and show their faces after the big break. But no, it's exciting. I think it's always nice when people start going back and you can feel the buzz of kind of life again, opportunities start bubbling around, people start kind of brushing off the cobwebs from the summer break. So plenty of things still to happen in that space, I'm sure. But for today, we're talking about, well, a topic which might not sound super sexy to certain people, but I think that's the point of digging deep into it. We're talking about governance and security and trust, all of the compliance things around a business, which, I don't know, don't always get the same spotlight, but have quite an important part, particularly in this B2B software game. Are you excited for the governance chat, Mike?
No, I like governance. I mean, had you asked me sort of when we started the DataCo journey 5 years ago, maybe governance wasn't on the top of my list, but I think where this goes and governance holistically as kind of a system and as a differentiator becomes very, very interesting. And I think what we'll unpack today is probably how we look at governance as it relates to the humans of governance and maybe some of the benefit you get from engaging with like the governance parts of businesses who normally get forgotten or left to the end, or the wrong parts of kind of processes. So yeah, no, I think it'll be an interesting one.
No, well, let's jump straight in then, Mike. And I think, yeah, governance always makes it sound a little bit boring. I think trust is really the key word, which will keep coming up through this conversation as we think through some of the things in this trust and governance space, which really are important when people are thinking about a new business. But maybe let's, same to our normal structure, we start with just some of the key headlines and the key learnings that we had before, and then we'll see where the conversation goes from that point. I'm sure we never always tick off all the points that we say in this opening bit. We never really reflect and hold ourselves to account, but it's always good to start somewhere. So I've got 4 today, Mike. I've got 4 for what I think are some of the key learnings that we had, or some of the things we're seeing going forward. So starting number 1 is really around getting particularly security and privacy right for particularly a technology company just always takes far longer than anyone expects. And the reality is, and the learning really is, it never really ends. It's an ongoing process. And the truth is, if you want to work with enterprise clients, then you need to invest in compliance and security and governance really, really early, even if it feels premature, I should say. So that's kind of the first point I want to just put out there. The second one is kind of what you were just hinting at there, that despite all of the frameworks and the standards and the controls, security and compliance and governance is still very much a people game, particularly when you think about how it works inside large organizations, and over investing in building key relationships with those type of stakeholders within a business is a very overlooked fact. A lot of people think about sales cycles and who's got the money, but the actual time and effort that goes into the people is hugely important. So I think people's a big one we'll cut into. Number 3 is a little bit of a kind of a learning, but also a bit of like a prediction of where we're seeing things going. But I think base compliance and security services are becoming more and more commoditized, I'll call them, and simply expected as part of a business. The same as accounting services are expected for a business to have. And I think we'll see this ongoing trend of those sorts of compliance and governance as a service coming into business models, and that presents opportunities for different organizations. So we can dive into what it means for the services being commoditized or easily available. And then the final one, again, hitting the big T word, building trust in any client is just a hugely critical part of a business and should be seen as like a core asset. The trust you build with clients and organizations is just so important for the longevity of a business and the longevity of relationships. And this is as much of a word of warning as anything else. But I think in a world where searching for an answer or creating a basic policy or something like that is incredibly easy with an LLM, if you don't have someone who truly understands what it means and doesn't understand the domain, then you're going to be left out. You need to have the way you build trust is by having people who know their stuff, making sure you follow through on what you say you're going to do, and being able to show up and have those conversations when the hard questions are being asked. Kind of a bit of knowledge, a bit about the services, a bit about the people, a little bit about just the time and effort and what it takes for setting these things up as well. So that's the suite of things to kind of break down today, Mike. Where do you want to begin?
I was just going to layer one more in there, and I think it probably comes on your last point, but I think very interestingly is you've called out kind of like compliance as a service, but also like the impact of having these like outsourced compliance platforms, if you will. You've got your Vantas of the world and your Cytals, and it's like a big part of the ecosystem now is these kind of plug and play like monitoring, compliance, policy sort of engines. But I think to your last point being critically important, the policy itself or the framework itself is really not the end of the journey there, right? It's compliance ultimately drives, and this is what kind of ISO and SOC try and kind of bring into a business is like really the operational system for your business is built around compliance, and really that comes down to like doing the right things day in, day out. Like when the decision's on the line, when the stress is up, when a customer needs to be served, it's making the right decision in the heat of the battle. And that's those things that you can't replace. It's like how you actually take some of these great, like out of the box accelerating like tools that are available, but actually the importance of like deeply embedding that across your organization.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think a lot of that, like we can start maybe in that tool space if this is where the point of the conversation's going. But I think this is where the analogy to the accounting services is really where I think that whole space is going. And it's the same as like you can get Xero or MYOB and you plug it in and you can get a basic chart of accounts and you have all the structures and you can start to classify your bank transactions and your financial transactions. But like there's still a skill in terms of having the rigor to make sure things are in the right bucket. Like just because I counted something as an expense doesn't mean it really was an expense, and then when it comes to tax time someone's saying, hey, that's actually not correct. And I think those tools have the same kind of pathway to them. If you just turn them on and expect that you're compliant because all of a sudden I've got 15 policies and I've got this automated tracking going on, it's just not the case. But they do a huge amount. It's like when you used to take all of your transactions and you're putting them into a spreadsheet and saying, oh, this is my ledger and I'm trying to manage it, like a crazy type of process. All that's happened is we've got to the point where things like security standards and other kind of compliance standards are now able to be tracked and monitored more simply with technology like a Vanta or a Drata or whoever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, whilst those tools aren't kind of the final destination on compliance, what we did learn through our experience is they are incredibly powerful. So having like a Drata, a dashboard, a trust center that you can point accounts to, like that does move the needle. And I think to one of the points you've raised, and maybe this is the next topic, that compliance is more than a process or an organization within a business or a function within a business. It's a set of people. And ultimately, like as you've called out, those people need to trust in the business. They need to trust in the humans behind the business, and being able to very quickly surface policies, point directions, provide materials is a really great step in just doing the basics right and delivering as promised when required.
No, absolutely. So maybe let's just dive a little bit into the specifics, Mike. I think it's always good to really talk through what we actually did do and help that as part of the story. And really, we used a few different pathways in terms of when we first set up the business, there were some other partners we were using with the technology to say, all right, when do we need to go and get to our compliance certificates? And it was pretty early on where we knew we were dealing with the big end of town. Like, again, this is the weird corporate venture capital story, something built for a bank. It's like you can't, when you're building something for a bank, you just don't have the luxury to be able to go and just, well, we didn't have vibe coding back then, to be perfectly honest, but go and the equivalent of vibe coding back there, hack something together, put it out there, see how it goes, see where it breaks. Like, the truth is you can't do that with a bank and you're dealing with their data. You have to have a certain level of rigor, and you need to make sure you've got the confidence you can provide back to them. So we worked with a few partners, both in terms of setting up the infrastructure in line with, say, SOC and ISO. So the guys at DNX Technology, shout out to them. We partnered with them quite early on in the piece, and they were doing some work with a little platform they'd built called Citadel, which helped to just set up the architecture in a way which was in line with the standards, with the separation of the different accounts you have in AWS and having an audit account, and down into the nerdy infrastructure things like subnets and how you're all kind of creating access control lists and things like that. But then what we did on top of that was we said we need to go and get ISO certified. What is the fastest path for us to get there? Like, what do we need to do to get all of this in place? And we had some basic policies, and it was kind of through going and talking to a couple of consultancies and some other areas that we stumbled across this space of compliance technology. And the vendor that we went with, and we have zero affiliation with them still, but happy to talk about them, was Drata. And they were pretty early on in their journey. I think at the point where we went with Drata, they'd gone out of stealth mode, and they were like a year or two into their journey, and they were a $2 billion company or something at that point. They were growing incredibly fast. And I just remember being so impressed with the suite of capabilities that they were providing you kind of out of the box from day one. It wasn't everything you need to be compliant, but it was the framework ready to go. Here's all the things we need to check it. Here's how you're going to go and work through different controls and show that you're meeting them. Here's how you're going to make sure you're ticking those controls against every requirement in, say, the ISO 27001 standard. Here's a base set of policies. Here's how you connect people. It was just an impressive capability. And the amount of time it saved us to use a platform like that as the backbone of our compliance kind of program, it was ridiculous. It saved us, like, I can't tell you how many hours and days that must have saved us by going down that path. And the thing was, like, there's this sense of false security in it a bit, because, like, it looks like you can do it and be like, oh, I'm compliant from day one, and that's probably what they tell you. But it still took us, I think after we purchased Drata, it was still a probably 2-month run at getting everything up to the point that we were ready to go into a full ISO 27001 audit. Like, it wasn't plug it in overnight, go and do it. So it still takes, I think that was the thing, is like, once you go through, and the reality is you do need to go through, well, it's a default policy, you've got to go through and read it and make sure you can comply with it. Because that's where you get in trouble, is if you put something in a policy and you don't do it, and an auditor comes and has a look at it, then that's when you get in trouble. So our pathway was go and invest in that, and then use that as the backbone of what we do for the rest of our compliance program. Before, I feel like I'm just going to keep riffing on this story, Mike, but I feel like you had some like interesting interjections you were waiting to do.
No, this is your space, Danny. You're the compliance man. I'm just the customer sales guy. I'll jump in when I need to, mate. Keep going. You're good.
No, but we'll get to I think getting to the sales angle of all of it's a good one. But let me just keep riffing on some of what we did. So I think the second step in terms of what we did to get there was getting, and this is all part of like a recommendation, and I think these are all really positive learnings in this space, to be honest. And if I was going to do it again, 100% I'd lean on a Vanta or a Drata. The biggest thing now is like cost. Like, they're not cheap necessarily, and I think that's another aspect of this. Is like, if you're going to go and get ISO 27001, you're probably talking about making $100,000 investment. Like, if you think about all the time and effort and what you need to do to pay auditors and what you need to do to pay the services and all the rest of it, it's not cheap. But we can come back to the cost in a bit. I think the second important point that we did was we got that program not up to 100% where we were like, we are so confident that this is bulletproof. We got it to, I don't know, 60, 70, 80, and even you can see on those dashboards how much you've ticked off controls. But we got it to a reasonable state, and then we went to the internal auditor. And because of the size of our company, we couldn't use an internal auditor inside the business. There was no one qualified enough and independent enough from what we were doing. So we got an external auditor, an external internal auditor, if that makes sense, to come in to do that. And the person we chose to do that, again, super happy to make shout outs there, was a guy called Sandeep Kumar, who runs his own little consultancy called Estero. And Sandeep is awesome. Like, he is the best type of internal auditor that you want to have, because he goes so much harder than any external auditor that you'll probably come across. And as painful as that does get in the process sometimes, because it nearly feels like there was times I had conversations with Sandeep that nearly felt combative, particularly like the risk, and this was for years, like every time we were like talking with Sandeep, there was always something which was really, and you're nearly arguing your case, but it's in a good way, because it's testing where the holes are, testing where you can get to that level of maturity or where you go. And so he helped us to flush out all of the things to say, oh, okay, that's something we think we're nearly got a tick box for, but actually, no, we've got to go and do this and this and this. And that nearly gave us a really detailed laundry list of everything we needed to do to get to a really solid position. And it was only once we went and did that we then went and said, all right, let's go and engage an external auditor who's going to do a formal certification and go through the full accreditation process. And again, the guys we ended up using was a company called, they're called Coast and Country Certificates. I can't remember who they're under. There's an auditor in there. Her name's Gunjay, and she's a legend. She's really, really, for an external auditor, which is very practical and very helpful. Again, just a really good external team that we ended up working with. But the process was really about using one of these tools to piggyback your program, getting some other external expertise to supplement and accelerate that and really point the torch of where you need to go, and then going through the full certification program. And that whole journey end to end, and that wasn't starting from a base of nothing, was like at least 6 months. It's like 6 to 9 months you're going to put into that with dollars. So it was, looking back, like, would you change anything from it? Like, we didn't have a choice really, so it's hard to say. But there's other things, we're not talking about the future just yet, but like the new space that we're in, straight away, you're like, if you want to go work with the big end of town, you kind of got to invest in some of this. And there's pathways now where those services, as I said before, are becoming easier to access. The same as like, you're a new business. Would you start a zero account if you're a new business? Yes, of course you fucking would. Like, you need to just start having that stuff ready to go from day one. Otherwise, like, what are you going to go like collect your receipts down the line and start to make a ledger of you? Like, that's where we're heading, and people, I think, are going to find more and more solutions and providers and options that pop up in this space focused around helping early stage companies on that foundational compliance journey.
Yeah, nice. So maybe if we kind of move along to the next topic then, which is really around people that you mentioned. So a good shout out there on a number of the people behind the scenes on kind of the DataCo internal compliance and the journey we were on. I think the other side of the coin though, given we were effectively building compliance tech of some description, if you will, to enable the safe connection, collaboration, analytics of data between large enterprise organizations, like in and of itself, it was a compliance capability that we were delivering. We also spent a lot of time working on working with other compliance stakeholders, first within our banking partners organization, across legal, InfoSec, privacy, all of these folks, data governance, but then very much on the client side. So I guess the kind of headline here is that generally businesses and like functions within a business will try and avoid interacting with the broader governance functions within a company as much as possible. There's not many marketers that love to sit down with lawyers and privacy experts and run their new whiz-bang plan past them, or even not really many want to talk to them about the new technology they're trying to bring in or the new capability they're unlocking with the big monolith platform they use, right? It's like, let's avoid that for as long as possible. Let's build the business case. Let's kind of drive as much pressure and excitement behind it. And then let's try and force these people to sign off on it as quickly as possible is the typical pattern of engagement. What we learned, and I don't know why we really went down this path, so I think we didn't really have a choice initially, but we really leaned in and started engaging with as many of those functional stakeholders as we could as early as possible. And really for us in the journey, it was the fact that like until we got those ticks on the paper, we really couldn't stand up at that stage the early MVP of DataCo. Like we actually needed to take the requirements from some of those stakeholders into the design and the build that ultimately became the solution. But actually what became apparent was that many of these people, although they don't own a P&L, although they don't own a product, they're not really ever in front of delivering services to the customers. They actually do, for the most part, want to try and innovate within the kind of functions that they sit in. They're like excited to get involved in new projects. And so it became critically important and part of the key coaching that we took to our clients around like, hey, to all of the things you've mentioned, Danny, we've got a compliant platform. We know this thing inside out, like forget about the external regulation and governance stuff. But like we know this works and we know that we've created a system that's going to build trust with your internal governance on the client side. So instead of ignoring those folks like you normally do, how about part of the engagement strategy is we bring them into the room and have a conversation very early on where you can put us in front of them. We can start to answer some of these typically kind of tricky or prickly questions around, oh, why are we doing this? Or how is your system safe? How are you keeping our data secure? But actually bring these people on the journey as early as possible. And I think where we ended up was that became like actually quite a differentiator from us, both on the sales side into the key kind of business stakeholders we were dealing with, but also then on accelerating kind of the implementation of our technology on the client side as well.
Yeah, absolutely right, Mike. And I think there's a couple of elements and themes in there which are worth just highlighting and emphasizing a little bit. And I think the first one is about kind of the proactive engagement that's required. A lot of people, I think, in this space, they're nearly like, don't talk about it unless they bring it up. And they're like, if we just don't talk about it and we just don't go down there, let's just hide from it. And then hopefully we squeeze it through. And they try to avoid the conversation and they get to the 11th hour, whether it's an internal project or whether someone's selling software in. And then, like, of course, the security and the privacy stakeholders come out of the woodworks when they go for the big internal approvals because they have to now. Like, most large organizations have them embedded into that process that they haven't given their thumbs up. It's not going to go through. So anyone who's trying to just avoid it, get to the end and they think that they're on a timeline and they think that they're close and then they get this spanner in the works and they're like, oh, these guys are just trying to derail it. But in the truth is they just haven't done the right prep work to get them over the line and to engage them. It's the same as just a standard sales cycle where someone's talking about engaging different stakeholders in the business and getting their buy-in for a business case, really. And the work that goes into that proactive engagement and bringing them on the journeys, you said they don't want to be the bad guys, most of them. Sure, there's a couple who people get like a little bit of a power trip. You find those security guys or there's like lawyers in an organization, like everyone's met those ones who like they're just feeling a bit, it's like, I feel I'm going to start offending people here, but like they're like, it's like parking inspectors, right? It's like you see those some parking inspectors and they're just frothing to give someone a ticket. And they're just like, look at me, I'm protecting the world because I just gave that dude a ticket because he's been here for 90 minutes and it's a 6. But like the majority of them is like, they don't want to be a bad guy. They're not trying to do it. Like there's a reason for what they're doing and they're trying to, like, they're not trying to just throw up roadblocks for the sake of it. And we found, like, I think it's better not to go into the specifics of people or processes here from the banking perspective, but we found some awesome stakeholders who were really commercially minded, who were keen to learn, who were keen to understand what was going on, and ultimately they became champions because they knew it's like, no, these guys aren't trying to avoid the conversation. They're proactively going in there saying, how can we do this in a way which is safer and more secure and still gets us to the value? We're trying to find that real balance point between kind of utility and protection. And that was always particularly in the technology parts of our business, that was really where we're trying to find that line. And it played through the engagement we made with those people into when we started using the insights as well, because that's the trust we built from building technology into, no, we can use data in a really safe and secure way here, even bank data, while still really protecting individuals and make sure no privacy is being breached or anything like that. So I think this like proactive nature is huge. And as you pointed to, the proactive nature on the customer or client side is just as important. And what we did very early on was we proactively created collateral. We created packs, we created explainers, we created things to say, hey guys, here's a point of view, here's what we're doing. We didn't wait for them to give us the 200 question InfoSec like questionnaire. It was always coming. We knew that was coming, but we didn't wait for someone to even get to that point. We were like, hey guys, we already know you're going to have to engage your privacy and your legal teams and your InfoSec teams. And this was talking to business people. We were saying, here's all the things we know that they're going to ask. Here's what you're going to have to go through and get your ticks through your internal processes. Let us help you manage those processes with, here's information. We'll give you the information. We're open. And that was a really good way of developing trust very early on, particularly with business stakeholders.
Yeah, and even with those compliance folks, I think anyone that, deals with corporate lawyers or, spends a lot of time with lawyers, like lawyers and ambiguity, sort of like chalk and cheese, right? It's not the best mix. So at least having an opening position, right? It's like, yes, you're paid to do your work. You're paid to give your own professional opinion to keep this organization safe. But rather than kind of litigating everything from here to the sun, let's kind of put the boundaries around it. Let's put a stake in the sand and say, this is our opinion. And actually, to your point around the collateral, we invested, significant money in getting external legal and expert opinions that could be documented as well. So we sort of had, here's our view of the world. Here's an external expert's view of the world. And now we welcome you to come and kind of piece that together and present the questions for which we haven't maybe quite answered to the level that you expect. But we're not kind of just sitting there, we're not ignoring you. We know you're super important. We're giving you the respect you deserve, but we're also kind of being very clear around here's how we think you should look at it. And 9 times out of 10, it was like, yeah, agree with, 80% of that. Can you give me a bit more information over here? So again, I think it's like, to your point, it really just becomes part of the broader like enterprise sales cycle and strategy and mapping those stakeholders. I think what we're saying is what was critically important in the technology that we were selling was that governance stakeholder as a broader group was one of the key decision makers in any deal that we were putting forward. And we kind of resourced or probably over-resourced against them.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think it's kind of came to that final point that I'd spoken about at the start, which is about having people who truly understand it, because it is about going and doing the work and finding the partners and engaging legal, but internally you can't just rely on external lawyers to always be your like professionals in this space. A, because that's an insanely expensive way to try and run a business, and B, sometimes if you only have the legal conversation, it gets like lawyers and lawyers together are a funny mix, right? Like as soon as you get two people who are representing a business, that like there's like a different, like there's these different rules of engagement, there's these different kind of dynamics, there's this like weird power dynamics, and there's this like, I don't know, let's put that one to the side for a second. And like the truth is, if you want to get through that, you need to have people who aren't just the lawyers who get this stuff. And the only way you do that is by people putting the time in to do it. I ended up spending a shitload of time like literally reading and like studying the Privacy Act in Australia, like going to like different lengths to deeply understand it, engaging professionals in the space who had an opinion to get their opinion to what I could then challenge, even though I don't have a legal background, but like going deep into like, no, what does it understand? What does it really mean? What are the practicalities? And again, it's not about trying to avoid the topic. It's like someone's going to ask and someone's going to need to know all of these things. Like you need to lean into the space. And I was happy to play that role in our business and do that. And like the remit that I had within the business meant that made a lot of sense. But I feel someone in any business needs to play that role. If you don't have someone playing that role, you're just missing this critical element to how you're going to engage. And I know, sure, we might be talking here to businesses who are somewhere on the edge of the spectrum and they're not dealing with customer data, or they're trying to deal with the smaller end of town. But I don't know, feel that's not becoming an excuse anymore either. But if you want to work with large enterprise organizations, this is 100% true.
Yeah, and you had it kind of in the notes, but I think to the point you just made then, that as regulation evolves, definitely in and around the kind of use of data, personal information, that, technologies that sort of, were adjacent and ignored for many, many years, like, you just have to lean in now. And it's incumbent on everyone within those businesses that's kind of client facing in any way, to be fluent in the language of governance and compliance if you want to kind of be able to continue to succeed. So
yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, so I think all in all, across all of these topics, like, generally my reflection of what we did at DataCo was I don't really regret, I don't really regret over investing in this domain. I think because of where we were playing in terms of data collaboration, absolutely, some technology which is kind of pushing the boundaries in terms of new privacy enhancing approaches, we didn't really have any other choice, and I absolutely don't regret putting the effort in to do it. The only thing is, with a small team, is what does that come at an expense to? Is it the product? Is it the sales? Like, in the end of the business, once we had all that in place, I could spend more time in the go-to-market and in sales and those things as well. Like, it's hard to think about, well, not too hard because we are thinking about this, but like with a new business, where do you invest the time?
Yeah.
And I think if you're starting purely from scratch, there is more of you're probably not going as hard as where you had to go. But I do think when you're building something from day one, it's like we say, all right, we're going to reestablish a technology proposition. Straight away, it's like, here are the different things you need in place to have it compliant in that security by design from day one. And I think having that lens and learnings is really awesome, because what we're seeing, the risk at the moment, is people are just vibe coding the shit out of things, and they don't know how compliant it is. They don't know the security elements to it all at the moment. There's a shitload of trust that whatever Claude Code just spat out is done in the right way. Or the infrastructure that I've said, go and set me up some AWS infrastructure for me to deploy this app. They don't know what it's like. Has it been configured in the right way? Yeah. So we're going through a risky period where potentially we'll see a lot of breaches from people who have just rushed applications out there in these new capabilities without truly understanding how it all fits together. But I do think on the flip side of that, there's a big opportunity for propositions to be that foundation layer, to work out what is the way to take a vibe-coded app and have it as there's some kind of foundation of security or infrastructure, and deploying these on top of that or something. There'll definitely be opportunities for people playing in that space going forward.
Love it. Exciting times.
Yeah, see, who would have thought that security and governance and trust would be exciting, Mike? We obviously love this space.
You're telling me there's an opportunity there. That's good. I'll stay interested.
Well, that's it. Well, who knows? Maybe there is a business opportunity down that path. But anyway, I think that's enough for trust and security and compliance for today. There's obviously plenty of other angles you can take this down, like all the topics we have. And as we go through and we keep diving into different areas, we find different subtopics and niches that I'm sure we'll pull up and continue to talk about in future episodes and future blogs of content that we put together. Anyone who's listening in who has specific questions about areas or other bits you want us to dig into in a business and say, what did you guys do with X? Shout out, put it in the comments, send us a note directly. The purpose for going through this, is a lot for us just to reflect, but it's for other people who are thinking about starting a business or are going down these pathways or have learnt from their own mistakes as well and want to contribute to the conversation. So please connect whenever you do. If you've got those questions, be sure to always do the classic actions to follow along, like and subscribe and all of that jazz. But otherwise, we hope you're enjoying what you hear and keep following along. And thanks for listening, guys. We'll hear from you soon.